The final bell at Jefferson High School rang through the crowded hallways, echoing off the worn lockers that lined the walls. Students rushed past each other, eager to escape another day of classes and tests. But for 17-year-old Marcus Johnson, the end of school meant something different. It meant running the gauntlet. "Hey, look who we got here." Tommy Walsh's voice cut through the noise like a rusty knife. His three friends flanked him, blocking Marcus's path to the exit. "Where you think you're going, boy?" Marcus clutched his backpack tighter, his jaw setting firm. He had heard this same tone, these same words, too many times before. "Just trying to get home, Tommy. Same as everyone else. Same as everyone else." Tommy laughed, a harsh sound that made other students slow their steps to watch. "You ain't the same as us, and you never will be. This is our school, our town." Sarah Martinez stood frozen by her locker, her hand still gripping the metal door. She wanted to help, wanted to say something, but fear held her voice captive. She had seen what happened to students who stood up to Tommy's crew. "My family's been in this town for 3 generations, Marcus said quietly, his voice steady despite the tension crackling in the air. "I got every right to walk these halls." "Rights?" Tommy stepped closer, his fists clenching. "The only right you got is to know your place, and it ain't here with decent folks." The hallway had grown quiet now, students pretending to organize their lockers while stealing glances at the confrontation. Teachers had already disappeared into their classrooms, doors shut tight against the drama unfolding in their corridors. Marcus took a deep breath, remembering his father's words about staying calm under pressure. He stepped to the side, trying to walk around the group, but Tommy wasn't finished. Not yet. An hour later, Marcus sat across from Sarah at a corner booth in Miller's Diner, the smell of coffee and fried food filling the small space. The old diner had checkered floors and red vinyl seats that had seen better days, but it was one of the few places in town where Marcus felt somewhat safe. "You okay?" Sarah asked, her voice soft with concern. She had finally found her courage after school, catching up with Marcus before he could leave. What Tommy said back there, it wasn't right. Marcus stirred his chocolate milkshake, watching the whipped cream swirl. "Same thing, different day. I'm used to it by now." "You shouldn't have to be used to it," Sarah replied, her hands wrapped around her warm coffee mug. "Nobody should." The bell above the diner door chimed, and Marcus felt his stomach drop. Tommy Walsh pushed through the entrance, followed by his usual crew, Jake, Mike, and Danny. Their eyes scanned the diner until they landed on Marcus's table. Well, Tommy announced loudly, his voice carrying across the small restaurant. "Look what the cat dragged in. Didn't know they served your kind here." Other customers turned to stare. An elderly couple at the counter shifted uncomfortably. A mother pulled her young child closer. The waitress behind the counter, Jenny, gripped her coffee pot tighter. "We're just having a milkshake," Sarah said, her voice shaking slightly. "We're not causing any trouble. Trouble follows some people wherever they go," Jake said, sliding into the booth behind them without invitation. "Ain't that right, Marcus?" Marcus stood up slowly, his hands steady despite the anger building in his chest. "We were just leaving." "Sit back down," Tommy ordered, stepping closer. "We ain't done talking yet." Mr. Miller, the diner owner, emerged from behind the counter. He was a thin man in his 60s, with graying hair and tired eyes. "Boys, I think you need to keep it down or take it outside. This is a free country, old man," Danny said with a sneer. "We got a right to eat here, same as anybody." "Not if you're disturbing my customers, Mr. Miller replied, reaching for the phone mounted on the wall. "Maybe I should call the police." Tommy's expression darkened. "Go ahead and call them. They know who really belongs in this town and who doesn't." The tension in the diner was thick enough to cut with a knife. Marcus felt every eye in the place watching him, judging him, waiting to see what would happen next. His heart pounded, but he kept his voice level. "Sarah, let's go," he said quietly. 3 days later, Marcus found the first note tucked under his family's mailbox. The paper was cheap, the handwriting sloppy and angry. His hands shook as he read the hateful words. threats that made his blood run cold. He crumpled it up and threw it in the trash, hoping it would be the last, but it wasn't. The next morning another note appeared, this time taped to the front door. Then came the phone calls, always late at night when his father David was working his security job at the warehouse. The voice on the other end was disguised, muffled, but the message was always the same. You don't belong here. We're watching you. Marcus started checking the locks twice before bed. He found himself looking over his shoulder on the walk home from school. Sleep became difficult, and when it finally came, it was filled with nightmares. On Thursday night the harassment took a darker turn. Marcus woke to the sound of glass breaking. His bedroom window faced the front yard, and through the curtains, he could see shadows moving near his mother's flower garden. His heart hammered against his ribs as he crept to the window and peered out. 3 figures dressed in dark clothing were spray painting something on the garage door. One of them held a crowbar, having just smashed the decorative garden lights his mother loved so much. Another was kicking over the small fence around her rose bushes. "We know you're watching," one of them called out in a loud whisper. "This is just the beginning." Marcus grabbed his phone, his fingers fumbling over the screen. He should call the police. He knew that. But something held him back. Fear, maybe, or the knowledge that in a town like this, the police might not care much about vandalism against a black family. The figures finished their work and disappeared into the darkness, leaving behind broken glass, trampled flowers, and words painted in red across the garage door that Marcus couldn't bring himself to read until morning. When dawn broke, Marcus stood in his driveway, staring at the hateful message scrawled across the white garage door. His neighbor, Mrs. Chen, walked over from next door, her face filled with shock and sympathy. "Oh, Marcus," she said softly, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "I'm so sorry. I heard the noise last night but I thought it was cats fighting. I should have looked outside." "It's not your fault, Mrs. Chen," Marcus replied, his voice barely above a whisper. But as he looked at the destruction around him, at his mother's ruined garden and the hate painted on their home, Marcus felt something he had never felt before, genuine fear for his safety and his family's well-being. His father would be home from work in 2 hours. For the first time since the harassment began, Marcus found himself thinking that maybe it was time to tell David everything. Maybe it was time to stop handling this alone. The question was, would his father's involvement make things better, or would it make the situation even more dangerous? David Johnson had learned to read people during his 12 years as a Navy SEAL. Body language, facial expressions, changes in routine, all of it told a story to those trained to listen. And his son Marcus was telling a story that made David's blood run cold. It started with small things. Marcus jumping when the phone rang. The way he checked the locks 3 times before bed. How he positioned himself at the kitchen table so he could see both the front and back doors. These were the behaviors of someone under threat, someone living in fear. David had been home for exactly 36 hours when he spotted the paint scrape on the garage door. Marcus had tried to clean it off, but David's trained eye caught the faint outline of letters that had been hastily scrubbed away. He ran his finger over the surface, feeling the rough texture where steel wool had been used. That evening, while Marcus was upstairs doing homework, David conducted what he called a reconnaissance mission. He checked every window, every door, looking for signs of tampering. In the flower bed, he found footprints that didn't belong to his family. 3 different shoe sizes, all work boots, all recent. "Someone's been watching the house," he said to himself, his military instincts kicking into high gear. The next morning, David called in sick to his security job, something he had never done in 5 years of employment. Instead, he positioned himself across the street in his old pickup truck, watching, waiting, gathering intelligence the way he had been trained to do in hostile territory. For 3 days, he observed. He took note of every car that passed, every person who walked by, every pattern in the neighborhood routine. On the 3rd day, he saw them 4 young men in a beat-up Chevy, driving slowly past the house, pointing, laughing. David memorized the license plate in less than 2 seconds. That afternoon, he made a phone call to the one person in town he trusted completely. "Officer Rivera, this is David Johnson. I need to meet with you. It's about my son." 20 minutes later, David sat across from Officer Elena Rivera at the back corner table of Murphy's coffee shop. Rivera was one of the few cops in town who knew about David's military background, and more importantly, she was one of the few he trusted to do the right thing. "What's going on, David?" Rivera asked, her dark eyes serious as she leaned forward. David pulled out a small notebook, the same kind he had used during covert operations. It contained license plate numbers, descriptions, timelines, everything he had observed over the past few days. "My son is being targeted," David said simply. "Racist harassment that's escalating to property damage and threats. I've been conducting surveillance, and I believe I know who's responsible." Rivera examined the notebook, her expression growing more concerned with each page. "Why didn't Marcus come to us directly?" "Because he's 17, he's scared, and he probably doesn't trust that anything will be done about it," David replied, his voice calm, but his eyes showing the controlled fury of a father whose child was in danger. "What do you want me to do?" Rivera asked. David closed the notebook and looked her straight in the eye. "Help me protect my son, and help me make sure these people understand that threatening my family was the biggest mistake they ever made." The annual Riverside County Fair was the biggest event of the year in their small town. For 3 days, the old fairgrounds came alive with carnival rides, food stands, live music, and families enjoying the late summer weather. It was also the perfect place for trouble to find you in a crowd. Sarah Martinez overheard the plan by accident. She was working her part-time job at the funnel cake stand when Tommy Walsh and his crew gathered near the picnic tables behind her booth. They thought they were being quiet, but Sarah had always been good at listening when people didn't want to be heard. Saturday night, during the fireworks, Tommy was saying, his voice low but excited, "Everyone's gonna be watching the sky. Perfect time to teach that boy a real lesson." "What kind of lesson?" Jake asked, leaning forward. "The kind that'll make sure he never shows his face in this town again," Danny replied with a cruel laugh. "We got it all planned out. Mike's cousin is bringing some friends from the next county over. Real friends, if you know what I mean." Sarah's hands started shaking as she listened. They were talking about Marcus, she was sure of it. And whatever they had planned for Saturday night at the fair, it was going to be bad, really bad. "You sure his old man won't be around?" Mike asked nervously. "His daddy works security at the warehouse Saturday nights," Tommy said with confidence. "Same schedule every week. It'll just be the kid, and whoever's dumb enough to hang around him." Sarah dropped the metal spatula she was holding. It clattered to the ground, and all 4 boys turned to look in her direction. For a terrifying moment, their eyes met hers through the service window of the funnel cake stand. "You hear something interesting, little girl?" Tommy called out, his voice carrying a clear threat. "No," Sarah said quickly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't hear nothing." But she had heard everything. And as soon as her shift ended, she knew exactly what she had to do. Meanwhile, across town, David Johnson was conducting his own preparation. He had spent the morning studying the layout of the fairgrounds, identifying entry and exit points, places where trouble might start, and positions where he could maintain visual contact with his son without being seen. David had requested Saturday night off from his warehouse job, telling his supervisor he wanted to spend time with his family at the fair. What he didn't mention was that he would be working a different kind of security detail that night. He checked his equipment one more time, a small 2-way radio, a compact first aid kit, and his service weapon, properly licensed and concealed. He had also arranged for Officer Rivera to be on duty that night, working extra patrol around the fairgrounds. Marcus had no idea that his father knew about the harassment. As far as the teenager was concerned, Saturday night at the fair would be a normal evening out with Sarah and maybe a few other friends from school. He was actually looking forward to it, one of the few times in recent weeks when he felt like he could relax and have fun. But David knew better. His military training had taught him that the enemy always picked the time and place that gave them the greatest advantage. A crowded fair, during fireworks, when everyone's attention was focused elsewhere, was exactly the kind of scenario that spelled danger. As Saturday evening approached, 3 different groups were making their final preparations. Tommy and his expanding crew of hate, David and his careful defensive planning, and Sarah, who had spent 2 days working up the courage to make the most important phone call of her young life. The first firework exploded in a shower of red, white and blue sparks, drawing every eye skyward. Marcus and Sarah stood near the cotton candy stand, laughing at something she had just said, completely unaware of the danger closing in around them. David saw them first. 8 men moving through the crowd with purpose, led by Tommy Wall. They spread out in a coordinated pattern, cutting off escape routes just like David had taught soldiers to do when surrounding an enemy position. "Not tonight," David whispered to himself, activating his radio. "Rivera, they're moving. Northeast corner, near the cotton candy stand." "Copy that," Officer Rivera's voice crackled back. "I see them." Tommy stepped out of the shadows just as another firework boomed overhead. Well, look who decided to show up." Marcus turned, his stomach dropping, as he saw not just Tommy's usual crew, but 4 strangers with cold eyes and cruel smiles. Sarah grabbed his arm instinctively, her fear evident. "We ain't looking for trouble," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the overwhelming odds. "Too bad," one of the strangers said, cracking his knuckle. "Trouble came looking for you." They moved in closer, forming a tight circle. The crowd around them was still watching the fireworks, oblivious to the confrontation about to explode. Marcus positioned himself in front of Sarah, protecting her with his body. "You picked the wrong night," Tommy said with a vicious grin, "and the wrong family to mess with." "Actually," came a calm voice from behind them, "I think you did." David stepped out of the darkness like a shadow coming to life. His movement was fluid, controlled, carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had faced down much worse enemies than small-town bullies. Tommy spun around, his face going pale. "Who the hell are you?" "I'm Marcus's father," David said simply, "and you've been making my son's life very difficult." One of the strangers, larger and uglier than the rest, laughed harshly. "One old man against 8 of us. This should be fun." But his laughter died when Officer Rivera appeared on their left flank, her hand resting on her service weapon. "Police, nobody move." The circle began to break apart, confusion replacing confidence. David used the moment to his advantage, moving with the speed and precision of his military training. In 3 quick steps, he had positioned himself between the threats and his son. "Dad," Marcus's voice was filled with shock and relief. "It's okay, son," David said without taking his eyes off Tommy's group. "These gentlemen were just leaving. We ain't going nowhere," Tommy said, but his voice lacked the confidence it had held moments before. "Oh, I think you are," Rivera said, speaking into her radio. "This is Unit 7. I need backup at the fairgrounds, northeast corner." Multiple subjects creating a disturbance. The sound of approaching sirens cut through the night air. Several of Tommy's new friends started backing away, clearly wanting no part of what was coming next. "This ain't over," Tommy said, pointing at Marcus. David stepped forward, his voice dropping to a level that only Tommy could hear. "Son, if you ever come near my family again, you're going to learn exactly what 12 years as a Navy SEAL taught me about dealing with threats. Are we clear?" Tommy's face went white. He looked into David's eyes and saw something that made his knees weak. Without another word, he turned and melted into the crowd, his remaining friends following quickly behind. As the police backup arrived and took statements, something remarkable happened.
Other fairgoers who had witnessed the confrontation began approaching the Johnson family. Mr. Miller from the diner was the first. "Marcus, I want you to know that what happened at my place the other day, that wasn't right," he said, extending his hand. "You and your family are always welcome in my establishment." Mrs. Chen appeared next, followed by several other neighbors. Even some of Marcus's classmates stepped forward, offering their support and apologizing for their silence. "We should have spoken up sooner," one of them said. "Nobody should have to go through that alone." Officer Rivera finished her report and walked over to where David stood with his arm around Marcus's shoulders. "All the principals have been identified," she said. "We'll be filing hate crime charges against the main group. The others from out of town have warrants in their home county, so they'll be facing additional problems." As the crowd began to disperse, and the fireworks finale lit up the night sky, Marcus looked up at his father with newfound respect and understanding. "How long have you known?" Marcus asked. David smiled, the tension finally leaving his shoulders. "Long enough to make sure you were safe, and long enough to be proud of how you handled yourself." For the first time in months, Marcus felt something he had almost forgotten: hope. Not just for tomorrow, but for his place in this community that had finally shown its true colors.